In honor of Super Bowl Sunday tomorrow, we are going to talk about a movie that really fumbles the ball. Produced by Jordan Peele's Monkey Paw Productions, Him was released in September of 2025 to audiences excited to see a different kind of sports movie. I'm Jekyll Hyde, and today we will discuss how the lack of balls and offsides tone of this movie contribute to its unexpected flop. Okay, I will stop now because obviously I don't know enough about football to keep making football puns. Him was directed by Justin Tipping, making this his second movie after 2016's Kicks was very well received, currently sitting with an 85% in Rotten Tomatoes. Him stars Marlon Wayans, Tyreek Withers, Julia Fox, Tim Heidecker, and Jim Jeffries. The film received a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes with an audience score of 56%. It's safe to say that people didn't really love this film, and I believe it's because we were led to have very high expectations for this project. It was marketed as a Jordan Peele movie, but I and most other professional movie fans understood that this was only going to be a Monkey Paw production, but I can see how any casual moviegoer would be misled by this trailer and expect Jordan Peele level production and storytelling. What we got instead was a fantasy cult movie where football wasn't really part of the story, but just the sport they chose to play. Beware of major spoilers ahead. The movie begins with Cameron watching a football game with his father. In this game, they are watching Isaiah White, the star quarterback of the Saviors, experience a compound fracture. Cameron's father tells him that this is what a real man does and encourages him to be the next GOAT or greatest of all time. I will not show you his injury here because there is nothing I hate seeing more than a compound fracture, but if you don't know what that is, it's when the bone breaks through the skin. Isaiah experienced a compound fracture in his leg, and in the case for some football legends, this would be a career-ending injury, but not for Isaiah. The film continues to tell us through a montage that Isaiah went on to play football for another 14 years after this injury. During this montage, they tell us that our film's protagonist, Cameron Cade, would be the next to replace Isaiah White only if Isaiah finally chooses to retire. While Cameron is practicing one night, a hooded figure emerges from the dark and bashes in Cameron's skull. He suffers a mild brain injury from this, but against doctor's orders, he still chooses to play the scrimmage. Before I go on, I need to mention that not one football game is played in this football movie. Before the draft, the owner of the Saviors reaches out to Cameron and invites him to a week of training and rehab with Isaiah White in their remote football retreat. The bulk of this movie is spent with Isaiah and Cameron talking in metaphors and training with hints of strange happenings, all while Cameron is experiencing hallucinations. The hallucinations, I was never sure if they came from the head injury or induced by the cult, and they never really explain. During the climax of this film, Cameron is tasked to fight Isaiah to the death in order to claim what was once Isaiah's role as star quarterback of the Saviors. We then learn the owners of the Saviors are a massive cult who all sold their souls to the devil to sacrifice a player and make him a star. We also learn at this point that Cameron's late father groomed him into taking the place of Isaiah White by joining the cult. In the end, Cameron chooses not to sell his soul to the devil, and he kills off all the owners except for Julia Fox, who falls on her own knife, and Tim Heidecker, who gets got by the devil himself. I hope this summary was as confusing for you as this movie was for me. Let's begin by discussing the overall tone of this movie. I believe horror and comedy go hand in hand. There is no horror without comedy, and there is no comedy without horror. Jordan Peele knows this best. After co-creating and starring in one of the biggest comedy sketch shows of all time, Key and Peele, he went on to create three of the most interesting high art horror films of the century with Get Out, Us, and Nope. All three of these Jordan Peele classics are equally as horrifying as they are funny. But in these movies, horror and comedy are used strategically to build and break tension. Some of the funniest people alive right now are in Him, but the movie fails to use the tools they have to successfully build and break the tension, leaving the film seeming one note the whole movie with no real highs or lows. Let's talk about how these comedians use their chops to try and create a performance that's equally funny and terrifying. Emphasis on try. Every time I watch this movie, I can't tell if it's trying to be a comedy like Scary Movie or a horror film akin to Get Out. I must emphasize how important the actors' performances are in this movie because there is nothing visually scary that happens, so the root of the horror is in the characters and the situations they are put in. Julia Fox and Tim Heidecker are hands down the best part of this movie. Both of them decided to play their roles strictly funny. Absolutely no horror or darkness comes through in Fox or Heidecker's performances. Instead, they choose to stick to what they know, and they are genuinely funny and entertaining. Every time they are on screen, it's like a breath of fresh air because because you know that they are going to make you laugh or at the very least smile. Because of this, I feel the film is more grounded in comedy, even though I'm not too sure if that is what the movie was going for. Jim Jeffries' character almost works. He is played as a funny character for the most part, but there is an underlying darkness in him that is present throughout the film. This sort of works because funny people tend to have a darkness within them. However, during the moment where Jim Jeffries is expressing his fears and frustrations to Cameron, he tries to be funny about it. Him cracking a joke right after things get real fails to build the tension that the audience needs to stay engaged with the story and really feel scared for Cameron. This part in particular makes Jeffries' character seem kind of dumb more than anything. Last but not least, I need to talk about the biggest disappointment in this movie, Marlon Wayans. I absolutely love the Wayans family. I grew up watching all of their movies so much to the point where I felt like I was raised by them. Even so, I was always enthralled with Marlon Wayans in particular. His comedy talent came so naturally to him, and I've never seen another actor so purely in love with the art of comedy like he is. I became even more impressed with him when I watched Requiem for a Dream for the first time in high school. His performance in Requiem really solidified his talent for me. Requiem for a Dream was directed by Darren Aronofsky, who also did Black Swan. More on Black Swan later. Darren Aronofsky is one of the most talented directors of our generation, and I believe part of what made Marlon's performance so good in Requiem was because of the direction he got from Aronofsky. I feel like in him, the director, Justin Tipping, didn't have a clear vision for this character and trusted Wayans to do whatever he wanted, which didn't work at all. Wayans completely missed the mark in this movie. His character was both funny and scary all the time. There are never moments where he is just scary or just funny. It's always a bad working combination of both. This combination almost works for Jim Jeffries because he was just a side character and we didn't really need to build that depth within him. Isaiah White is supposedly our main villain in this movie, and there is nothing to fear him for or feel for him. This makes him very one-dimensional and one-note throughout the whole film. He should have started the movie as a funny guy and slowly descended into being completely scary, or he could have flip-flopped between being scary in one scene and funny in the next. This would have kept the audience on our toes, not knowing what to expect from this madman. But instead, he is kind of funny and kind of scary from beginning to end. There is never a moment where he crosses over to being full scary because he's always kind of silly. When it comes to American football, fact really is stranger than fiction. Unfortunately, this movie is a full fantasy that incorporates none of the real-life horrors of playing professional football. As someone who doesn't care about football but grew up in a family of football players and diehard fans, I know there is so much to say about the culture of football that has never been said in way of a psychological horror. The best film I can compare this to is Black Swan. Black Swan delves deep into the pressure of ballet, the psychology and humanity in Nina, her overwhelming relationship with her mother, and how that affects her ballet performance. Him does none of that. Him is a satanic cult movie and nothing more than that. Him could have delved deep in the consequences of CTE in football players, the effects youth and high school football have on a child, the cult-like NFL fan base, and what happens when you throw millions of dollars at a person who grew up living paycheck to paycheck only to take that income away after the average 4 years a player spends in the NFL. There is so much to be said about the culture of American football, but this movie is too lame to reveal what it's actually like to be a pro player or a fan of an NFL team. In the movie, Cameron's father dies off screen before the events of the film. Towards the end of the movie, Cameron reveals his father dies disappointed, knowing Cameron didn't really want to play football. But now he is playing football to make up for the guilt of disappointing his late father. This would have been okay if that pressure he received from his father was passed down to his family, but his family are actually really caring and supporting of Cam, and there's no real pressure from them. They live in what looks like a small but nice home, and his mother is never like, we need that football money. In fact, his mother even encourages him not to play football if he doesn't feel ready after his head injury. His brothers hype him up through his football endeavors, and they seem more supportive of his dreams rather than applying the pressure missing from their late father. There is absolutely no stakes in this movie. I think this film would have been better overall if his father was alive. The overwhelming presence his father had at the beginning of the movie when Cam was a child would have been great to have throughout the movie as a reminder to us and Cam why he is doing this. We don't know if his dad is trying to live his failed dreams through his son or use his son as a meal ticket, or if his dad was also groomed by the Saviors into handing over Cameron as their next football sacrifice. All of this would have been great to know in order to raise the stakes and root for Cameron to hightail it out of there. But because of this lack of pressure, we can assume that this is Cameron's dream, but he probably is just stressed because of the freak attack that happened. That is, until we find out Cameron never really wanted to play football in the first first place. Speaking of freak attack, Nancy Kerrigan's real-life attack was done better than the attack in this movie. The injury shouldn't have been an attack at all. This instead should have been an injury that occurred while playing football. This would have commented on the actual real-life dangers of football and CTE. CTE is a far too common degenerative brain disease found in players of high-impact sports such as football, wrestling, boxing, and MMA. CTE causes lower brain function and often suicidal ideations. However, CTE cannot be diagnosed until after the person who has it dies and their brain can be examined. As of right now, the NFL is trying to find possible solutions to prevent players from getting CTE during their time playing football. This is a very sensitive topic to mostly football fans and parents who want to put their children in youth football. Knowing about CTE makes watching players take hard tackles no fun, and also forces parents to acknowledge that putting their child in football puts them at risk of receiving lifelong brain damage. I believe art is meant to provoke thought, and this movie could have been an excellent provocateur to force people to look at what really happens after hard hits to the head. There's quite a lot of violence in this film, with one scene where a guy gets hit in the head with a football repeatedly until he loses teeth and then laughs about it, or one moment where Cameron hits a guy so hard the guy goes down and looks like he suffers a traumatic brain injury lying on the ground in a fencing position. But these moments aren't integral to the film, and they are just moments that happen. Nothing really provokes these moments, and nothing happens because of them. They are just moments. I also believe this injury should have been a football-related one rather than an attack, because when they reveal at the end that the Colt attacked him, it would have been more of a mic drop moment if it seemed like a common injury. We already know right away that the Colt attacked him, because we know it's a Colt movie from the first 5 minutes. Who else could have caused this attack? It couldn't have been done by a football fan, because Cam wasn't even drafted yet. Speaking of football fans, there is a moment in the beginning of this film where Cameron is looking out at the football stadium and hears the roaring of the crowd. He turns around and sees the devil emerge from the darkness, dressed and painted as a Saviors fan. The devil asks Cam to sign his forehead before bleating like a goat and then disappearing. I thought this moment was going to foreshadow the rest of the movie, and I was so excited because there is also a part where Cameron goes to the hospital after his attack, and the doctor tells Cam that as a doctor, they can't recommend him play football, but then Cam asks, but as a fan? Then it cuts to Cam preparing to play the scrimmage game for the draft. With the combination of those two scenes, I thought they were going to reveal that the whole town was in on Cameron being used as a sacrifice, so that the fans of their local football team were guaranteed to win. Americans love football a scary amount. If your dad likes football, then you know just how scary it is when he yells at the TV when his favorite team isn't doing well during a game. It's also sometimes even scarier when he screams for joy when his favorite team wins. It could have been great to see how fans worship their favorite football teams and how scary and sometimes violent fans can get over the disappointment of a loss. There are also parasocial relationships built between fans and players, unlike any other parasocial relationships you might think of. Fantasy football fans often feel like real-life coaches with real connections to the players they choose for their team, often taking it personally when a player gets injured or has a bad game. One of my favorite shows of all time, The League, does this so well. It's about a group of friends who run a fantasy football league, and they show how invested these people can get with the specific players. As someone who doesn't care about football, I think this show is at its best when it's about the football. There are also people who will bet their whole life savings on football teams and players. It would have been very interesting if this movie explored the relationship between the fans and the players, but it in fact does not. I want to briefly touch on the fact that they breeze right past Cameron's youth football years. I think this film could have benefited from showing how Cameron dedicated his life to football and how he compared to the other kids playing football with him. Was Cam naturally gifted? Was he more dedicated than the rest? Did he sacrifice relationships with his friends and family because football was his life? There is so much characterization to be explored there that we just don't have. I grew up with 3 cousins who were youth and high school football players, and I saw their whole life was football. They watched football, played fantasy football, started playing actual football really young, and 2 of them are even in college playing football right now. Eat, sleep, football. That's what I saw in them. And now being a high school substitute teacher, I see the same things with my students. These kids spend 5 hours a day, 5 days a week after school training and practicing football on top of maintaining their schoolwork and social lives. And the saddest part is, I know some of these kids will dedicate their high school careers to playing football and might never even get a scholarship to play in college, therefore guaranteeing they will never go pro and their dreams will never come true. It would have been cool to see how football not just affected Cameron, but his peers too, and how Cam's peers viewed Cam as a player. Did Cam really work harder than the others, or was he able to breeze by because he was groomed by the saviors?
I guess we'll never know.
The last thing I think this movie misses is the relationship between football players and their money. There are way too many stories of pro athletes making millions of dollars from their sport only to retire from a freak injury or just not be good enough to go on after only a couple years. They end up losing all of their money only to have to get regular jobs living paycheck to paycheck because they didn't have the proper help managing their money when they were millionaires. This film focuses on making the money, the parties, the chains, the success, but they never touch on how fragile this success is. It would have been interesting to see what happens when someone tries to be the star savior's quarterback, but then fails to bring that success to fulfillment. What would Cam do if he signed his name and then made tons of money playing football, only to completely stop playing football and lose everything in his life because he didn't fulfill his end of the bargain he made with the devil? Money is horrifying in itself. The world is ending right now because of money, and for most people, their biggest fear is losing their financial stability. This film would have done a lot more to explore the financial repercussions and implications of professional football. I can't end this essay without stating how this image from the trailer is not in the movie. So we as an audience have an expectation for how this movie is going to end, but it doesn't end this way. For the majority of the movie, it really does seem like Cameron is passionate about playing football. So when the film ends with him not signing his name, even after victoriously fighting Isaiah to the death, it left me feeling confused, to say the least. They are promising him with greatness and wealth for him and his family, and he has no real moral compass to be explored in this movie, so why wouldn't he take the deal? I think it would have been better if Cameron didn't kill Isaiah or the other 3 people he kills before turning away from the situation, because after seeing this, I can only ask, so Cameron is okay with slaughtering these people, but he's not okay with signing a deal with the devil to make his and his family's dreams come true? This would have been better if they all died from freak accidents like Julia Fox, or explicitly grabbed and exploded by the devil like Tim Heidecker. This would have given the audience the idea that all of these people are now rotting in hell, killed by the hands of the devil, forced to suffer for to pimp a butterflying vulnerable black men with a dream. In the vein of this being a satanic cult movie, it really says nothing about cults or the morality of using people for gaining wealth because justice is really never served. The movie is just a 90-minute waste of time. I think the ultimate downfall of this film is that the whole experience of this story is boring and unengaging. The writers and creators of South Park, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, once said,
"We can take these beats, which are basically the beats of your outline, and if the words and then belong between those beats, you're f***ed, basically. You got something pretty boring. What should happen between every beat that you've written down is either the word therefore or but." Right? So what I'm saying is that you come up with an idea and it's like, okay, this happens, right? And then this happens. No. It should be this happens, and therefore this happens. But this happens, therefore this happens.
The story is exactly what Parker and Stone discuss what not to do when writing a screenplay. Isaiah gets injured, and then Isaiah plays for 14 more years. Cameron's dad dies, then Cameron gets attacked during the football practice. Then he goes to the football retreat, then he trains, he parties, he is celebrated, then he fights Isaiah to the death, then he chooses to walk away, then all the bad guys die, then the movie is over. There's no connection between the events in this movie. The whole movie is just one thing after another, then another thing, then the end. There's no connection to how Cam's injury affects his ability to make decisions and play football, or how his dad's death changes him and everyone in his family, or why would Cam kill Isaiah if he was just going to walk away anyways? Cam killing Isaiah is just something that happens. We don't learn anything from this, and this doesn't affect his next decision to walk away because logically, how could it? And Cameron also makes a remark when he kills Isaiah. Right before he asks Isaiah, he goes, "What's the opposite of a savior?" And then Isaiah goes, "A killer." And then Cameron goes, "No, it's a mascot." What the fuck does that even, what does that even mean? What is that supposed to mean? That's all I have to say about this movie. It could have just been done better. It really could have pushed the envelope and really been impactful. This movie had the ability to change the way we look at and think about professional sports, but it doesn't. This isn't the 80s. The audience isn't starving for lowbrow, uncontroversial entertainment. The world is on fire right now, and we as an audience are looking for art to show us new ways of seeing the world. We are starving for information. This movie could have revealed so much about the culture of football that people may or may not not be aware of. It could have introduced a moral compass to remind us that we don't have to take the easy way out, because hard work and dedication is often more rewarding than any financial or social gain. This film chooses to explore none of that and instead just exists. The first time I watched Him was in theaters, and I left this movie so utterly disappointed in the way it didn't live up to its full potential. But that's what happens when you make a soulless movie with nothing to say, trying to appease everyone that watches it. I think what's most disappointing is Justin Tipping's reaction to the quote-unquote haters. He told UK publication Radio Times, "It's gonna be a classic later on, and then you're gonna be mad that you didn't see it. Why? Because you were influenced by what other people's perception of what the art was." Actually, Justin, this won't be a classic, because not even you can tell us what this movie is really about. What this movie is about is nothing. And you compare this movie to Sinners and Weapons, but it's nothing like these movies. Weapons actually has something to say about abuse, school shootings, isolation, parenthood, the relationships between teachers with students and their parents, the corruption in the police force, corruption in the school system, and so much more. Sinners has something to say about being an outsider, the relationships between black and white people, how being white-skinned isn't enough to save you from systemic racism, choosing between the traditional way of living or getting involved with changing times, being caught between two cultures, and the overall black experience, and so much more. I saw both Sinners and Weapons in theaters just as I saw Him in theaters, and I can gladly say when I left the theater after watching Sinners and Weapons, I felt moved and inspired and like I learned something new. When I left Him, I felt nothing. Justin, you also think this movie is ahead of its time, saying it would be better received in the UK. I think they're really going to appreciate it here in the UK, because I think even with the time zone, right, you guys are ahead, and y'all are ahead with the humor. Monty Python was ahead of its time, and that came to the US, we was like, wait, what is this? According to this comment, I guess this movie is actually supposed to be a comedy. The most convoluted, meaningless, unfunny comedy I have ever seen. And according to the UK Film Review and Nerdly, unfortunately for you, Justin, the UK didn't like the movie either. I would encourage you to actually listen to what we have to say about your movie. The film is actually beautifully shot. The score and soundtrack are out of this world. And the opportunity you gave these comedians to show the world that they are so much more capable than what we may perceive is groundbreaking in its own right. But there are some great flaws in this movie that you can learn from. This is only your second movie, and you have so much potential to make great art, but you have to listen to what the critics have to say. We don't want to see you fail. We want to see great art. But in order for you to make great art, you have to learn from your mistakes, understand what you did wrong, and do better the next time. I have never before recommended a movie be done again.
I have never in my life yelled at a girl like this. I was rooting for you. We were all rooting for you. How dare you? Learn something from this.
But I really feel that if you, Justin, could take this criticism in stride, then Him deserves a remake. I would love to see this film have an opportunity to live up to the expectations we gained from watching the trailer and the cultural criticism we expect from a Jordan Peele movie. If you made it this far, I will now give you a very tender virtual forehead kiss. Please leave a like and consider subscribing to my channel. My new goal is to upload a video every Saturday, so be sure to catch next week's video where I discuss Poor Things and its relation to Erikson's theory of human development. Most importantly, please let me know in the comments what you thought of my opinions and what you thought of Him. Have you seen it? Did you avoid it because of the backlash? Did you love this movie and think I'm a total hack? How do you feel about football? What's your favorite football team? Mine is obviously the Broncos, but that's only because that was my mom's favorite football team. I would love to discuss with you more in the comments. Now, I will leave you with one final favor. Don't watch the Super Bowl tomorrow, and instead just watch Bad Bunny's halftime performance on YouTube Monday. Ciao, friends and foes!